Resuming debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today with heavy concerns about Bill C-8, a law presented as a measure to secure Canada's telecommunications and critical infrastructure. I think that we can all agree that cybersecurity is very, very important. Our informational networks are the lifeblood of our economic, education, health systems, and daily lives. Protecting this critical infrastructure is essential. But, Mr. Speaker, without liberty, there can be no security. As such, my speech today will focus on how Bill C-8 impacts on individual liberties of the average Canadians. Bill C-8 grants the federal government sweeping powers. It allows the Minister of Industry, with the direction from Cabinet, to order telecommunications service providers like Rogers, TELUS, and Bell to act, to refrain from action, to remove equipment, to prohibit certain services, and in extreme cases to suspend or terminate services to even individual users. While Bill C-8's intention is to focus on service providers, it indirectly encroaches on the fundamental freedoms of Canadians by failing to carve out an exemption for individual Canadians who rely on the internet and telecommunications to work, to travel, to communicate, to engage in commerce and banking, and connect in their virtual communities. Mr. Speaker, consider what that means in practical terms. In today's world, losing access to telecommunications or the internet is not just a minor inconvenience. It is a form of isolation. It can it can prevent someone from working, from learning, from paying bills, from accessing health care, and participating in civic life. It is, in essence, a digital prison. And here is the gravest concern about C-8. It contains provisions of secrecy and non-disclosure. A person whose internet is cut off may not know why their services were terminated. They may not know the evidence against them. They may not have a meaningful opportunity to defend themselves. A Canadian could be trapped in a digital prison with no way to challenge it. Bill C-8, therefore, breaches fundamental guarantees under the Charter of Rights. Mr. Speaker, this strikes at the heart of our Constitution. Section 7 of the Charter guarantees that everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of the persons, and that right is not to be deprived thereof except in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice. Fundamental justice includes knowing the case against you and having a fair opportunity to defend yourself. Bill C-8, as it stands, allows the government to deprive individuals of essential services without ever seeing the evidence, which is a profound breach of these principles. Section 8 of the Charter, which protects against unreasonable search and seizure, is also engaged. The bill also allows the government to collect private information without consent with minimal safeguards. This combination of secret orders and the lack of disclosure creates a scenario where Canadian privacy and liberty are deeply at risk. Even if national security is invoked, Section 1 of the Charter requires that limitations on rights be proportionate and necessary and minimally impairing. Secret orders, broad powers, and no avenues for defense fail this test. Canadians should not have to surrender their rights to remain secure. Security and freedom can coexist. The government can both defend our telecommunications networks and protect the rights and freedoms of all Canadians. Bill C-8 may secure networks, but as it stands, it risks imprisoning citizens digitally and denying them fundamental justice. In so doing, it undermines the very freedoms that we seek to protect. Let us not mistake security for liberty. Let us not trade our rights of Canadians for a false sense of protection. Mr. Speaker, let me give you a concrete example of how Bill C-8 could affect an ordinary Canadian. Imagine Sarah, a citizen frustrated with the government program that she believes was mismanaged and that was corrupt. In her frustration, she posts online, threatening to expose government corruption. She threatens to reveal secret information she has collected about the program. The government views her post as a threat to telecommunications system, and so quietly issues an order under Bill C-8. Her internet provider receives the direction to shut down her internet and phone services, all without a court warrant, and all without court order. The same provider is legally forbidden from disclosing that reasons why Sarah's internet was suspended. If the provider were to explain, they could face penalties and even jail. The next morning, Sarah is shocked to find that she cannot access her mail, her bank account, or work portal. Her social media accounts are frozen. She cannot contact her friends, family, and colleagues. She has been cut off entirely from the digital world, and she has no idea why. This is a system of double secrecy. The government order is hidden, and the provider is prohibited from telling her anything. Sarah cannot see the evidence against her. Sarah cannot ask questions, and she has no way of defending herself. She is effectively trapped in a digital prison, isolated, powerless, and silenced. Over the following days, the impact deepens. Sarah cannot pay her bills, participate in remote work, access healthcare portals, or communicate with anyone. Eventually, she finds out that the government is behind this, so she attempts to challenge the order, only to hear that any judicial review may involve secret evidence that she cannot see. The provider has the information, but under Bill C-8, they are not allowed to share it. Every attempt to assert her rights is blocked. She is not merely inconvenienced, she is entirely cut off with no meaningful recourse. Mr. Speaker, this scenario is conceivable and legal under Bill C-8 as it stands. It illustrates why C-8 secrecy and non-disclosure provisions are so dangerous to individuals. You may say that this would never happen. The government no doubt will insist the intent of the bill is clear. But why should Canadians trust them? We must take the bill at face value. We must rely on what the text explicitly sets out in the law. Otherwise, the law intended to protect telecommunications infrastructure could easily be weaponized by any government against ordinary citizens. Citizens most at risk are people like me, those who publicly and loudly express dissent, challenge orthodoxy, or raise uncomfortable truths. These citizens most active in civil society are most at risk of being cut off, penalized, and isolated without ever knowing why. For these reasons, Bill C-8 undermines the principles of fundamental justice in the Charter as it stands. Security in this context can be a pretext for control, while transparency and liberty are sacrificed. Mr. Speaker, Sarah's story is not just hypothetical. It is a warning. Bill C-8 risks turning ordinary Canadians into prisoners of secrecy, silence without cause, and stripped of their most basic rights. We can secure our networks without the risk of trapping innocent citizens in a digital prison and without stripping them of the ability to defend themselves. This can be done. We can provide clear exemptions in the legislation for individual users, which it should be a part of what we discuss at committee. These are practical, reasonable measures that governments could adopt. Mr. Speaker, we owe it to all Canadians to do everything in our power to elect leaders that will not be silenced, that will protect their security and will guard their freedoms, because freedom without security in itself is a cage. With the honourable member from South Hespeler. Thank you.
Good job. I thank the member for indicating to the chair that she was splitting her time. The honourable parliamentary secretary, the government house leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not sure. I believe the member is going to be. I'm not too sure if she's in support of the legislation, to be honest. It comes across as she has some concerns for individuals like Sarah. I think the minister has been fairly clear as we go through this legislation. C-8 is important for many different reasons. The one that I just recently highlighted was the fact of the consumer, of our economy. And we need to protect through cybersecurity It is not an option for government to do it. It's something that has to be done. And I'm wondering if the member would not, at the very least, agree cybersecurity to protect the Canadian economy is absolutely critical, and we need to have the legislation, and maybe it's just a question of having some amendments that would address some of the concerns that the member has put forward.
The honourable member for Haldeman Norfolk.
I thank my honourable friend for the very important question. Yes, I want all Canadians to know that cybersecurity is an extremely important thing in this digital era. It is very important for the government to take this seriously, and this bill is a very, very important bill. But that does not mean that there are elements in this bill that, as a legislature, if I see, and as a trained lawyer, that I must bring to the public's attention. And there are some concerns about how individual users are not properly treated in this bill, and they need to be corrected. Thank you.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Edmonton Manning.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and congratulations to my colleague for such a wonderful speech, highlighting an important issue. There's a lot of concerns we hear from Canadians about Bill C-8. Some of them she included in her speech. Maybe she needs to shed the light again on those concerns. That would be great.
Member.
Thank you to my honourable friend for the question. I think the most important issue of this bill is we recognize that there are times when our telecommunications infrastructure is threatened, and in those instances, the government must act expeditiously to minimize and to curtail that threat. However, when these provisions can seep over into the realm of ordinary citizens, and then just the example I gave of Sarah, where her entire life is unraveled because of this legislation, I do not believe that this should have been the intent of this legislation. And so we really need to look at the impact of this legislation on ordinary individuals, because the average Canadian needs their telecommunications in order to facilitate every aspect of their life.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The honourable parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Canadian Identity and Culture.
Thank you. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for their speech. Now, I just want to come back on one point. You're saying it's important for cybersecurity, and you put the emphasis on Sarah's story, and of course, private life should be protected. But what are the advantages for the private citizens, and are you going to work with us in committee?
Quand on dit en français,
when in French you use the vous, it is as if you're addressing directly to the other member.
Thank my honourable friend for the question. The advantages to private citizens, security is always an advantage, but security cannot come at the expense of liberty. We have the Charter of Rights in place, and it must be respected. There are a number of provisions. Section 11 and Section 12 of Bill C-8 infringe Section 7 of the Charter because it's a deprivation of our essential services without procedural fairness. Section 10 and 11 of the Act also infringe on Section 8 of the Charter because it's a deprivation of privacy against unreasonable search and seizure. Section 11, 14, 16, 18, and 19 also infringe Canadian liberties because it's a deprivation of Section 1, justifiable limits and the proportionality of any legislation upon a person's freedom, even when national security is a justifiable ground under Section 1. So there are benefits. Security is a benefit to Canadians, but it cannot come at the expense of liberty.